this railway cannot carry both transit cargo and local cargo. So if you extend it without expanding its capacity from Mombasa to Nairobi significantly, then what you're saying, it will only be carrying transit cargo. If it's only carrying transit cargo, then we have to ask, why would Kenya borrow $10 billion to carry cargo for Uganda and Rwanda and DRC?
You've written so much about the standard gauge railway, and so perhaps this is a question that you've answered over and over and over again. But tell us, does it make any sense to you?
Thank you very much, John Allen.
Yeah.
That to me almost sounds like a rhetorical question, as you have said. I pronounced myself on this railway right from the outset before it was built, and I suggested that it shouldn't be built. Precisely because even from very preliminary observation at the time, it did not make either commercial or economic sense to me.
And now that we are there, right? Not there all the way. There's a railway that's operating between Mombasa and Nairobi. There's one that's supposedly being built between Nairobi and Malaba, the second leg, which is more expensive than the first leg. Is there even the economic power to be able to power through and make sure that this thing is finished, and then now we deal with the consequences of what a working railway looks like, even if it's mounted us with all sorts of debt?
Let's start with the value proposition of this railway. What was supposed to be. We were told that this railway was going to move freight between Mombasa and the hinterland faster and cheaper. Okay? We were told that it was also going to have a lot more capacity so that it takes cargo freight off the road. Now that it is finished, it would be good to ask the question, has it delivered that? And the answer is no. We were told it would have a capacity. The word used then was design capacity. That it has a design capacity of 22 million tons. We now know that the installed capacity is 9 million tons, 8.7 something, based on the amount of rolling stock and the configuration of the track that has been built. Now, is it cheaper? No. If it was to service its debt, it would be, to break even when it's servicing its debt, it would have to charge, in fact, much more, considerably more than what trucking charges. It is also more inefficient for shippers than trucking, because trucking moves your cargo from port to your premise, and it takes the container back to the port, to the shipping line in a seamless operation. Now, this train brings the container, the cargo, the freight to the inland port in Nairobi, and then you have to pick it from there, and then you have to pay to take the container back there. So the container and the owner are now separated, and the process of taking back to the containers back to the shipping line has become a complete nightmare. The containers are getting damaged, they're getting delayed, because you have taken a logistics service which was being done by the private sector, you've broken it in the middle, and it is being done by the state, by a state monopoly. We know what that does. We privatized these things, these utilities, precisely because the state is very inefficient and very disorganized in doing these things. You're seeing what Kenya Power is doing to power consumers. So the proposition that what you needed was a new track was flawed ab initio. Because in fact, there was nothing wrong with the old track railway that it was still running, isn't it?
Yeah.
It still runs even now. What the problem was rolling stock and the service, and Kenya Railways being able to provide the service. So instead of diagnosing the correct problem, we went and decided that the problem was a new track. It was going to move cargo in 8 hours. Now, this cargo has been on the ship for a month, and it's mostly raw material. It is not perishable. What difference does it make if it takes a month and a day to get to Nairobi, or a month and 2 days?
I think Kirero Wangugi, who's pronounced himself so many times.
As we've done that together also, yes.
Exactly, and he talks about this issue. You know, for a person who's getting stuff off of a ship that has taken so long, it doesn't make sense for it to get faster now that it would be here. It's only a person who doesn't know how to budget properly, or is very excited about seeing a container arrive very quickly that would do something like that. But look, the railway line is built in part. It's here. It's operational. I want you to use this opportunity to respond to our Deputy President's assertion that somehow by December that SGR will have broken even. Try and imagine what he could be reading from to be able to make that statement.
I don't know what he's reading from. I'll give you a very simple math. The interest on the debt is about 20 billion shillings. Okay, interest only.
Yeah.
So if it can carry, when we know the capacity is good, it's running, can run a maximum of 12 trains, and each of them holds 3,000 tons. So we have the parameters, okay? If you do very simple math with that, you say, if you are costing it, and you say, first of all, it has to pay interest, and it's running at full capacity, that in itself you would have to charge 50,000 shillings per container for interest only. Okay? The total cost of trucking container, I was just doing that some math some time back, of trucking back and forth. Yeah, you bring the freight and you take the empty container back to Mombasa, is under 50,000 shillings.
It's around
40 something,
45,000.
Yeah, okay. Yet, remember, if you are charging, you're saying interest alone needs you to charge 50,000 shillings. But the shipper still has to pay about 15 to 20,000 shillings from ICD to his premise and back. Okay? Yeah. So you would have to charge no more than 30,000 shillings. Okay? So that you can compete with trucking. Okay? Now, 30,000 shillings, as we say, doesn't even pay your interest.
Yeah.
Okay? You haven't put fuel, and you haven't put depreciation, you haven't put labor. So basically, there is absolutely no way that it can actually pay its way. Now, you will notice that when they started, they said that they're charging a discounted tariff. And they keep extending the discounted tariff and extending the discounted tariff. It's because they cannot actually charge more than that without charging more than trucks are charging. So you have to explain, you would have to justify. So the question they have to explain, why is public money, which should be paying for healthcare and education and other things, why is that money being used to subsidize commercial freight? Yeah? Commercial freight, which was not only paying for itself when it was going by road, it was also paying for the road. Because for every liter of diesel that a truck uses, 18 shillings goes into the road maintenance levy or road fund, okay? So not only are trucks paying their way, they're actually paying for the road. Yeah? So they're getting zero subsidy from the public, okay? I did some bit of calculation saying if all the cargo is coming by road from Mombasa to Nairobi using known fuel consumption rates of trucks, you're asking how much are trucks contributing to the road levy. And it's probably in the region, just Mombasa to Nairobi, is in the region of 6 billion shillings a year. Okay? At 6 billion shillings a year, they can build a new road. So when you're saying that the trucks are finishing the road, it doesn't matter. They're paying for it. You know, if when you're using something and paying for it, it's supposed to be finished. You know, it's meant to depreciate and then replaced. So as long as I'm paying for it, trucks using the road and depreciating is not a problem. It's actually a good thing. Yeah. Because then they keep
paying for it to be renewed,
and that kind of thing. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. And now, so the question of breaking even is not even one that we should address. The question then that is more fundamental is the one you raised. Now that we have it up to this point and it's going to Naivasha, it can't pay its way, so it will be paid for by the public purse. Should it continue? Now, the question as to whether it continues is a very critical dilemma. It's a critical dilemma because, as I said, it has a capacity of 9 million tons of cargo. Nothing ever operates at complete full capacity. So you're probably talking about 7 million tons of cargo effectively, what it can freight. Now, the dry cargo from Mombasa to Finland, going through the port of Mombasa, is already over 15 million tons. In fact, the transit cargo is well over 8 million tons. So what you're saying is that this railway cannot carry both transit cargo and local cargo. Okay? So if you extend it without expanding its capacity from Mombasa to Nairobi significantly, then what you're saying, it will only be carrying transit cargo to Uganda and beyond. If it's only carrying transit cargo, then we have to ask, why would Kenya borrow $10 billion to carry cargo for Uganda and Rwanda and DRC?
You know, that's a perfect place to ask about the question that they constantly say you can't do, comparing apples and oranges with the other lines that are being built and the other infrastructure developments in East Africa. There's been plenty of analysis around the cost of Tanzania's SGR versus ours. Not only that, the cost of their pipeline versus ours, and the cost of moving goods from Dar es Salaam now to other parts of East and Central Africa. What have we done to ourselves? If you were to put it in a couple of phrases, what have we done to ourselves by now essentially making the SGR compete with these other infrastructural developments, these other SGRs in the region?
Let's start with Tanzania Central Line. First, it's not a new railway. It's an old railway line they're upgrading. Two, the reason why it was being upgraded and the project was mooted, and it came long before us, it did not come with the Chinese. It's actually been appraised by many people, was to exploit huge nickel deposits, which are in northern Tanzania and in a place called Musongati in Burundi. So the rationale for this railway is mining. Now, mining has always been historically one of the main reasons for having railways, because there's very few alternative ways of transporting heavy minerals. So that railway had been found to be economically viable. And it's not for shipping in imports, it's actually for shipping out exports. You can see the difference. Okay? Now, if you're shipping out, if the railway is viable because it's got downward cargo, it can even afford to charge very little for upward cargo. Now ours has...
And effectively subsidize passenger travel.
They can do all sorts of things. Because I understand that nickel deposits in northern Tanzania and Musongati is the single largest unexploited nickel deposit in the world. So it's a huge mineral resource. Okay. The other thing that we have to remember is Tanzania is very natural resource rich, generally, including their huge natural gas deposits, which they are exploiting.
Yeah.
Equivalent to about something like 10 billion barrels of oil, so to speak, as of now. They actually say, are going about this differently.
Would you say
the right way? Yes. Yeah. They're going about it the right way. They can afford to finance it. If you look also, even in fact, one of the ways to tell the difference between the two is you go to the website of that railway line since it was planned, and you can see a lot of information. You can see all these sort of best practice ways of approaching such a project. What you see in ours, it did not exist before, sometimes in 2010. It is parachuted in by the Chinese, and all of a sudden we need a new railway. Because if you really read the first medium-term plan of Vision 2030, it is only talking about sorting out the RVR concession and improving the existing railway. Then somewhere out of nowhere, this thing is parachuted in, and it becomes a top priority project, and it is pushed through without any public debate. I mean, it breaks virtually every provision we have on the Constitution on financial principles, you know, of transparency, equity, value for money. All those things are thrown out of the window. So they are very big contrasts. And obviously, if you do that, you can expect consequences, because the things which you are supposed to go through to mitigate against some of the consequences we are seeing now.
You didn't go through.
You didn't go through. Now, if you look at the Ethiopia Railway, which is clearly also was more cost effective than ours.
And longer.
And longer and electric. It's struggling on very many things. And not only the fact that they did it a bit better, they've also done a lot of wrong things. You know, also the same mega projects, the hydroelectric power, the sugar factories, all sorts of things. I heard about that recently. It has bankrupted Ethiopia. And as a result, you have seen huge political convulsions leading to some of them being forced to change political leadership. You're seeing these type of projects doing the same, causing political unraveling in Sri Lanka. You're seeing it in Pakistan. In Pakistan, it's going to be very bad.
Using Malaysia reconsidering.
In Malaysia, they've cancelled the project. Burma has also cancelled a port project when they saw what happened in Sri Lanka. Montenegro is in serious trouble with some road to nowhere, built by China Road and Bridge. Same people, the same guys who are building our projects. So these are sort of been, when you look at the images, you look at the maps of China Road and Bridge.
The One Belt Initiative.
The One Belt Initiative. You go and look at those images, and you look at the pictures and what they have there. And you notice on African coast, the only thing which is there comes from Mombasa to Nairobi. So we are part of a Chinese grand master agenda. This has got nothing to do with us. And there we are paying for it.
Look, you can't escape now asking this question. What should happen to the people who pushed this through? Right from, because this spans to two presidencies, essentially. What should happen now that we're in the spirit of fighting corruption? What should happen to the people who pushed this through? And how do we get out of this? If indeed we are supposed to get out of it?
I think there's a good chance that this is going to create the sort of economic crisis that is going to force political change of some kind, because of the magnitude of the problem that it's going to cause the country. I think it's going to undermine the leadership, the legitimacy, the political legitimacy of the kind of leadership we have had, including those people who approved this, which is the Grand Coalition government. The documentation that I have seen shows that this project was actually signed in 2012 by the previous government. I have had claims that it was inflated. The costs were inflated by this government. The documents I have seen do not suggest so, because they show that they have 2 contracts. There was one contract for the track, which is $2 billion, and there's a contract for rolling stock, which is $1 billion. Now, the contract for rolling stock looks very suspect, because you're looking at the prices being quoted for these trains that we bought, which are more than twice the market prices you see for GE state-of-the-art locomotives. But that contract was also signed in 2012. It was not signed by this government.
Yeah.
So it's upwards of $3 billion. And if you look at the loans that were borrowed from the Chinese, it was $3.2 billion. So the claim that they took a good project and inflated it is actually not actually borne out by
the facts,
by those documents.
Yeah.
So then you have to say that the responsibility that the Grand National Coalition government actually bears responsibility for this project. I have asked people, I've confronted people and said, I have raised a question as, why did we push this project while at the same time we were trying to do LAPSET? Yeah? And should have been fairly obvious to anybody doing financial planning of the country that it would not be possible to finance both this railway and LAPSET at the same time. Because when you, as an economist, you always ask yourself, what is the opportunity cost of what you are about to finance, of something that is proposed? So the proposal to spend $10 billion on this railway, to me, immediately struck that it will affect our capacity to borrow for other big projects. And the first victim which I saw there was LAPSET, which to my mind is a better project. Yeah? It is a much better project.
Because it opens up a
new part of the country. It has equity. It has equity considerations. It has many things going for it. Especially if you do it in stages, you do it gradually, sort of in stages. It gives you a second port. In fact, in the first article I wrote about the SGR, before it was started, I said, look, even if we were to build a new railway, okay, which also sort of serving the domestic market as well, it would have made more sense for me to put that railway from Lamu to Thika, which is only 400 kilometers, actually shorter than if you go Lamu, Kitui, Thika, and that's why we were talking about coal and cement and things in Kitui. It would have made more sense to do that. When you get to Thika, you have an old way leave, which goes from Thika to Nanyuki. So you could probably have gotten, then using that way leave, you've gotten a new railway to Nanyuki, and probably onwards with a small extension towards Isiolo. Now, if you do that, you can then put your inland container depot there, in fact I call it LAPSET Light. You could put your inland container depot there and already begin to serve Ethiopia and South Sudan by road. Isn't it? Because you already have a road now to Ethiopia. You could now be having a second. So that allows Lamu Port, if you're importing goods, you could consign those goods to Mombasa or Lamu, because once you get to Thika, you've got the goods in Nairobi.
Exactly.
That would probably even have allowed us to then look at how you can just use the existing railway and dedicate it for transit cargo. There are many configurations of things that you do. And those are the things that as an economist you actually do. When these projects come up, if you are sitting there in the treasury, those are the questions you ask the politicians. Tell the politicians, these are the options we have. This is what looks like a good value for money for the country. So the other question you have to ask is, where were the technocrats?
Or perhaps not even where were the technocrats, what was the motivation of the project?
Yeah, because even if it's for the Chinese, and Chinese are trying to do whatever, we could have told the Chinese that our priority is Lapset. So if you want us to do a big project here, we want a railway from here to there. We want a railway from Lamu to Nanyuki. And I believe that we could probably have done it for the same amount of money.